Um, where are you from? Give me background. Like, where are you from?
Yeah. So Cleveland, not Cleveland born, but Cleveland raised. I was actually born in Warren, Ohio, about an hour outside of Cleveland. But by the time my dad came out of the military, we moved to Maple Heights, Ohio. So that's where I grew up, elementary school, high school, so on and so forth. Parents and grandparents were all involved in ministry, really everybody in my family. And so, that seed was planted early, so to speak. But I also, was a three-sport athlete, so that was all intertwined between ministry and sports and all that type of stuff. But yeah, Maple Heights, Ohio is home.
Okay, I'm in Cincinnati now. I just moved here back in, what was it, August?
Okay.
Um, so how far is that Maple Heights from
So
Cincinnati?
Cincy from about four and a half, somewhere around there.
Okay,
Yeah, yep,
gotcha.
yep, yep. Because it's two to Columbus, and then it'll be another two to get out towards you. So I've been to Cincinnati, man, a few times. Skyline Chili, that's like kind of automatic when you go down
Yeah,
to
yeah,
Cincinnati.
yeah. I
Yeah,
haven't
but
had it, but they say it's like a thing.
yeah, it's the thing. Every city got their own, whatever. So that's the thing out there. But as a sports guy, we don't really rock with Cincinnati teams. So,
I understand.
anytime I come out there, man, I'm there for business, and then I'm getting back home. So,
Yeah,
how you
yeah.
like it out there, though?
It's cool. I moved here for work. My
Okay,
day job as a reporter journalist. For a local station here. So it's cool. I was originally in Memphis, so I
okay,
personally I love Memphis,
yeah,
but I definitely think in terms of the quality of the city,
yeah,
is a step up.
no, for sure, yeah,
So so far it's been cool. It's
cool.
been cool.
Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Chicago.
From Chicago, that's
Yeah,
right. Okay,
born and
okay,
raised in Chicago.
okay.
And I've lived a few places since then, and then now I'm here,
Gotcha.
at least for the next 2.5 years. So
Okay,
um,
okay. And
it's
you
been
working
cool.
for a news station out there, or what?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay,
do. Yeah,
gotcha.
that's my full time gig. I do that,
Okay,
and I do a lot of like storytelling surrounding government and
okay,
stuff. So um, attempting to branch out from that and do more. I think
sure.
there's an entire I guess undercurrent of stories that aren't being told, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
definitely trying to branch out more. But typically, I end up covering something government, something politics,
gotcha.
something like that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can promise you this conversation will be completely out of that vein.
definitely. That's gonna be refreshing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
what is it like being a chaplain? What is
yeah,
that like? People have this, I
yeah.
guess, the stereotype of it, but what is it
Yeah.
like?
So, chaplaincy, and I'll be the first to admit, I didn't know that chaplaincy existed in the sports world. I knew about hospital chaplains, police chaplains, but I didn't know that it existed in the pro sports space. I also didn't know it was as big as it was in the world of athletics. But just to kind of connect a couple different things here. So, as I mentioned, grew up in a household full of preachers, pastors, teachers, ministers. And at 13 years old, I knew I wanted to pursue whatever God's will was for me at that time. And so I prayed, and I was just hoping God didn't want me to preach the gospel. And he did. So for 3 years, I tried to run from that call. But at 16, I stepped into that call to ministry while also being an athlete. And at that time, all of my coaches and teammates would always ask me to give us a prayer before we ran out of the locker room onto the field or the court. And, as I look back 20 years ago, I see that God was really using that time to prepare me for what I would be doing later on in life. And so, fast forward the story, I'm on a full scholarship at Bowling Green State University. I'm thinking I'm going to play football and go to the NFL, but some irresponsible life choices on my part ultimately led me to losing that full scholarship after 3 semesters. And so now I'm back home in Cleveland, and I'm trying to figure out, well, what's next? And I knew that even though I would probably never play sports again, I wanted to use my testimony as a way to encourage coaches and athletes on how to pursue faith in Jesus while playing their sport. So I got introduced to this incredible international sports ministry organization called FCA, or Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I got hired by them in 2018. And growing up in Cleveland, one of the first things you recognize is this is a diehard sports town, specifically a diehard Cleveland Browns town.
Mhm.
And, in order to have influence in the city, so to speak, it's helpful to be tapped into these different, pro athletes and organizations in
Mhm.
order to accomplish things throughout the community. And so I just began to pray and ask God, how can I impact change in a ministry context through the world of pro sports? And so through FCA, I wound up being able to meet various people within the Cavs and Browns organizations, which ultimately led to me being invited into both organizations as a team chaplain. And, team chaplain, by definition, is really just someone that walks alongside these coaches and athletes and talks to them about everything away from the game that they're playing. So we're dealing with, their faith. We're dealing with, if they're having issues at home in a marriage, or, trying to figure out what post career looks like. We're talking about how do they leverage their platform of influence as a way to evangelize and share the gospel. And then, we're just walking with them through just practical life stuff as well. Guys get injured, guys are waiting on contract extensions, or guys are getting traded, so what are the spiritual ramifications of all that? And how can we as a chaplain really be the hands and feet of Christ and walk them through the word, pray with them through certain situations to help them understand God has a purpose, God has a plan, and there's something specific God wants to do in and through their lives, so long as they allow him to do it. So a chaplain is really that spiritual advisor or the pastor of a team, similar to where you have a pastor of a church that shepherds the congregation. A chaplain really is blessed to be in a position where you're shepherding the lives of coaches and athletes within a respective organization. So it's been really humbling to do it, especially in the town that I grew up in. And we're seeing God bringing revival in sports right now. That's for sure.
Definitely. Well, you mentioned that you were hesitant to, accept that call. You didn't want to necessarily be that preacher. What was the hesitation? Why the hesitation?
Well, mainly, man, because I didn't see any 13-year-olds preaching the gospel. Like, when I looked at, people in the pulpit, they were a lot older than me. And, I always jokingly told people, man, we look at the scriptures and we see Jesus at 12 years old in the temple, and he
Mhm.
says he has to be about his father's business. And I always say, man, in our society, in our culture, we always talk about, like, we're him. No, like, Jesus was really him. And I'm like, he's him. I'm not. Like, I don't want anything to do with that, and I really just felt unqualified. If I'm honest, I felt embarrassed. Like, what would my friends think if, they're all out here living one way, but, I'm the church boy and things of that nature. But, when I ultimately leaned into it, I really just embraced the opportunity to, what Jesus tells us, man, to be in the world, but not of it. All right, so if me being a young guy can have influence and reach my peers who aren't necessarily pursuing Christ in this manner, then what an incredible responsibility and privilege it is to live out faith in front of them in a way at a young age where I can help disciple them and bring them into relationship with Jesus Christ as well. So the initial hesitation was just, fear of what people would think, fear of embarrassment. Did God pick the right person? What does being a minister look like? Because I saw it through the lens of my grandparents and my parents, but I ultimately had to have enough faith. All right, well, if God, you're calling me to this, aside from how you use my grandparents and my parents, there's a specific way you want to use me. And ultimately, I surrender my life to him. And what I always say, man, is that my yes to God at 16 ran ahead of me 20 years and opened up the doors that I'm walking in now. So one of the greatest decisions I could ever make was surrendering to God's will at the time that I did.
Oh, that's amazing. What was that journey like? Go a bit into that journey.
Mhm.
I grew up in church myself, born and raised. My parents weren't my father, but my all my uncles, pastors. I did everything imaginable in church.
Yeah.
And there was not necessarily for me like a period of rebellion, but there was a period of um I guess this embarrassment
Hmm.
of church culture, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of made me distance myself. What was that
Yeah.
like for you?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I grew up in a very strict Christian household. And
Mhm.
I'm gonna tell you how strict. So strict to where, we couldn't go to the movies. We weren't allowed to go to school dances. I had to lie as to why I couldn't go to my high school prom. Like it was that type of strict. I have two younger sisters. They couldn't wear pants. So we grew up in a very legalistic Christian experience. And so, by nature of, and let's just take faith out of it for a second, the more you tell someone not to do something and it becomes taboo, like when they get any ounce of freedom, like they're more than likely going to run towards the very thing you told them not to, because they want to know, well, why shouldn't I run to this? And that's exactly what happened to me, man. So, I had opportunities to go to different colleges, but I picked BG because it was far away enough from home to where I could have some freedom, but it was also close enough if something jumped off, I could get back. And
Mhm.
so being away from home and having a little bit of freedom for the first time, I did what most college students do. I started partying, I started drinking, I started hanging out, and I lost complete sight and focus of the reason I was there in the first place. I had a dream to play ball and go to the NFL one day, come back home, play for the Browns, but I allowed what I was restricted from doing, so to speak, to become the very thing that I fell in love with, right? Wanting
Mhm.
to try to get with every girl possible on campus, wanting to, just live this life that I did not grow up in. And, I ultimately rebelled, and for no other reason other than I just wanted to see what the other side was like. And so ultimately, man, it was one of those situations where because there was never any balance, between the two. Ultimately like jumped off the deep end and it resulted in me getting suspended from school for a year. I had a 1.06 GPA and I wound up having to come back home to Cleveland. Life as I knew it seemed to be over at that moment. I became very depressed. I had a battle with suicidal thoughts, because I felt like I had fallen so far from grace, that I was taught that God gives. But one of the last conversations I had with my grandfather before he passed away, who was my pastor, I always tell this story. He told me right before I went off to school that I was going to need God to make it through college and I was going to need God to make it through life. And I remember there was just one day, man, I'm at my parents' house and I'm in the bathroom just crying, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror and the words of my grandfather come back to me and I hear his voice and the last two things he told me. And it was in that moment in that bathroom in Maple Heights, Ohio, where I just cried out to God, rededicated my life to him. And as a result, he gave me this incredible testimony that I'm now able to use to share with coaches and athletes across the country and the world, even. Hey, no matter how far we far from God's grace, he sent his son to die for that. And as long as we're willing to accept his love, accept his forgiveness, repent, turn away from that lifestyle, and pursue after the cross, deny ourselves, right? Take up our cross and follow Jesus. Life as we know it can turn around and get better. So that's my story, man.
Mhm. How do you find that balance? A lot of people, they think if you work in sports, or TV or whatever,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily think you can have that balance. How do you find that balance?
Yeah, for me, man, I think that it's more so finding rhythms as opposed to balance. I don't think like I've learned, from mentors and just living that I don't think we'll ever come to a place in our lives where everything will feel balanced. But I do believe that with the help of the Holy Spirit, we can get to a place where we find ourselves in good rhythms. And one of the things that I've always looked at, man, is where Paul talks about, yes, we're free, but don't use our freedom to get tangled up in the things that, we ask God to get us free from. Right. So in understanding we do have freedoms and we do have liberties, right? Not all things are going to be beneficial for us as we continue to grow spiritually. Not all things are going to, like, there's going to be some things that we have to sacrifice in order to live a life that's pleasing to Christ. And so for me, it's just about getting into a rhythm where, like, hey, is what I'm doing, impacting my journey with Christ in a negative way? Or is this something that I'm doing that's helping me to get into a good rhythm to where I'm able to live one in a way that pleases the Lord? And then also my life is able to be an example to others. Being a husband, I have to set an example for my wife. I'm also a father. I have to set the example for my son as well. So, understanding that there are liberties and freedoms we can enjoy, but ultimately our pursuit of freedom should not come at the expense of affecting our witness. That's how I look at it, man. So when we keep those things in mind, it really can help influence your decisions as far as how you maintain and find that rhythm as well.
Definitely. What do you find dealing with these athletes? They're the most common challenge.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the biggest things, man, is loneliness. You got
Mhm.
to think these are guys who, unless it just happens trade or where they're drafted, these guys are playing in cities and towns that they've never been to before.
Mhm.
There's no community there. There's no family. There's no friends. And it's a business, right? And so they have to be very mindful of who can they trust. And so a lot of these guys deal with just, isolation, kind of keeping themselves to themselves. And even though they're in a team sport, especially like a sport like football, they're like sports like basketball, you can always identify the star player and they can kind of get things and make things happen on their own. On football though, you need all 11 guys, right? And so it presents more of this camaraderie in this team aspect. But
Mhm.
even from what I've seen in our locker room, is you have guys that still kind of just keep to themselves, for no other reason that they're just trying to see who they can trust. I literally had one of our athletes shared with me recently, that I've been discipling. He said to me, he said, "Man, you're one of three people in my life that I know is never going to ask me for anything." Like, and I thought that was thought that
Wow.
was telling, right? And it was humbling for me, because I haven't known this guy that long, but he sensed something within me that gave him a confidence. No, I can be vulnerable in front of this guy because I know he doesn't want anything from me, but he wants for me. And so, loneliness is a big thing these guys struggle with, because they just don't know who they can trust. They're in unfamiliar places and things of that nature. But, to your question, man, that's where a guy like myself really can come alongside them, right? Because if we look at the life and the model of Jesus throughout the whole New Testament, no matter where people were in society, no matter what issues they were dealing with, he met people where they were. And as a result, it was the love that Christ showed them that compelled them to come to him. In the same vein, I realized that even if this guy doesn't know me, right? Why, for what reason should he have to trust me? I know as long as I show that I genuinely care about him as a man and not an athlete, I believe that the Lord will create intentional opportunities for these relationships to grow. So, loneliness is huge. And then another one, man, is just identity. Who are they outside of the sport that they play? For most of them, man, they've had a ball in their hands, since they were 4, 5, 6 years old, and it's all they've ever known.
Mhm.
So what other passions do they have outside of the game? How can they leverage their platform of influence to create other opportunities for them? Because we all know sports has an expiration date. The very initials NFL, often we hear it says it stands for not for long. And so if your identity is tied to this pigskin football, well, that and this career is not for long, well, what are you going to do after it's over? I never forget, man. I heard Clark Kellogg, college basketball analyst, former Ohio State and NBA player, said for athletes, the question that they have to be able to answer is, who am I outside of my accomplishments? And I believe, if one of my jobs is to help them understand, well, if Christ has already said these things about you, if he's already said that you're more than an overcomer, right? If he already says that, to be strong and courageous because God is with you wherever you go, if God has already said these things and they're true about your life, then
Mhm.
our identity has to be found and shaped in his word, and not just what you do on the field or on the court. Man, something that I've come to learn, man, and I share this with my athletes all the time, is that God is not more concerned with what we are accomplishing than who we are becoming, right? Like he wants us to become more like him. But if the chase and pursuit of success or stats, becomes our focus, right? Then, Mark 8:36, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And so one of the things that I encourage our athletes, man, is to have this mindset of souls over stats, right? To pursue the health of your soul over the health of your success, to pursue the health of your soul, to make sure that when it's all said and done,
Mhm.
you get the ultimate prize and you spend eternity with Jesus Christ. And in saying that, man, like it's not to say don't work hard in what it is that you do. No, by all means, go have a Hall of Fame career, because if the platforms that God gives you brings him more glory, then the God be praised for that. But at the end of the day, our pursuit of success as an identity issue should never outweigh or override our identity being solidified and rooted in Christ. So,
Definitely. I know for me, it's not sports, but it's TV.
yeah,
Early on in my career, I found, and I kind of noticed it, thank God, like soon before it took off or before it was too late, if you will, that my identity was connected to my job. Okay, I'm on TV, and and it became this thing
yeah,
kind of subconsciously. I never would say it directly, but it just became this thing subconsciously. And um I had to essentially check myself. And my in my industry is not long either.
hmm,
You're not at a place long. It can end at any moment. The logistics of it is in question, given that people aren't watching TV like they used to. And so while you think it's something, and it is something,
yeah,
it can be here today and gone tomorrow. Um, Practically, how do you know, I was self-aware to see that, right? And I
yeah,
kind of caught it before it went too far.
yeah,
How does a person who may not see that their identity is being attached to their job, their status,
yeah,
their degree, their
hmm,
success,
yeah,
how do you deal with that person? How does that person,
yeah,
progress?
yeah, absolutely. So I believe, man, what Jesus says. He says, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto myself. So one, we have to be mindful that any platform, any opportunity, any stage that we have is a gift from the Lord. And we need to be asking him how to steward it well for his glory, so that when people see, the Bible talks about, let your light so shine before men so that people may praise your good works and point to your Father in heaven. And so we should be incredible stewards, whether it's on a court, a field, in front of a camera, in an operating room, whatever the case may be. Like the believers should be so excellent in what it is that we do, that when people point to our good works, like it points to Jesus, right? In order for him to get the glory. And so I think, man, for me, it just starts with just being able to ask God to help you be a good steward of the opportunity, as well as a good steward of the moment. We never know how long the Lord will have us in one position. Just like you said, man, you don't know how long your career in TV will last. I don't know how long, my career will last in sports ministry, but I do understand while I am here, right? The Bible talks about have your hand to the plow and don't look back. So I believe it's a recognition of stewardship, being where your feet are, and asking God to help you maximize that moment for however long he has you there, so that it ultimately causes more people to find him. I think we have that mindset. It makes a world of difference for sure.
Mhm. How did you know sports ministry was the route that you would take?
Yeah, so honestly, man, just looking at the dynamics of our family, we had a lot of athletes in our family on both sides, athletes that played professionally in various leagues, and I saw how the careers went of some that had relationship with the Lord, Doesn't always mean that everything went right. You know, they had
Mhm.
challenges as well. And then I saw the lives of those that didn't have relationship with God and how their careers panned out. And you know, when you turn on the news, right? They always say, you know, bad news spreads faster than good news, right? You see these athletes dealing with a number of different things every single day. And I even remember being at a young age, just having a thought like, man, like when things go wrong in these guys' lives, like who's speaking life into them, right? Like who's coming alongside them, you know, who's reminding them, hey, you know, you haven't fallen too far from grace, you know, God still loves you. You know, we're all sinners saved by grace. Like who's reminding these guys of these things? And because I didn't see, you know, any of that happening, like it really just prompted a desire in my heart and in my spirit. Like, man, God, I would love to be in that position to do that, you know, for athletes because you've done it for me. And so again, not even realizing that chaplaincy in the sports world was a thing. I just wanted God to use my life, having been a former athlete that experienced challenges in life, right? But I also encountered a real God that was able to restore me, redeem me, and put me in my place of purpose. I just wanted to be in a position to do that for coaches and athletes as well. So, you know, it just stemmed from what I saw in my family and stemmed from what we saw in society, that somebody has to be willing to step into the lives of these men and these women and encourage them and let them know, hey, you know, falling down doesn't necessarily mean you've lost the race unless you fail to realize Christ died for you to be able to get back up and keep running. So that's where the desire came from.
Mhm. What what makes a what separates a good athlete from a great athlete in your opinion?
Yeah, a good. So I was talking to somebody the other day, man, about I appreciate certain athletes more in their passing than I did when they were living. And for me, man, Kobe Bryant is one of those guys. Like I can't tell you over the last 2 weeks in the gym working out how many Kobe Bryant messages and interviews I've listened to. Because dude was just built different, man. Like that Mamba mentality was a real thing. I was watching even the Redeem Team documentary on Netflix not too long ago. And the first play of the game when they were playing Spain, even though him and Pau Gasol were teammates, like he told his guys, man, I'm running through his chest. I got to send a message, right? And
Yeah.
Kobe was talking about the other day, you know, the difference between a good athlete and a great athlete. You know, a good athlete is going to show up when they're asked to show up. They're gonna, you know, do whatever they have to do within that schedule. But a great athlete, you know, they're not gonna be have to told when to show up. Matter of fact, they're gonna be there before everybody. They're gonna stay after everybody else. And you know, being around pro athletes every day, I mean, you see it, man. You see why certain guys are where they are in their careers, or they're held in the regard that they're held in, you know, because you have guys that, you know, literally just come, and no knock to them. You have guys that come in, you know, they do whatever is on the schedule for that day, and then they're going home to do something else or be with
Mhm.
family, and that's fine. And they still
Yeah.
perform well, you know, but then you just see the guys, man, that are great, you know, that motor and that mindset is just different, right? It's not enough for them to have a good practice. Every rep counts, right? They want to dominate every rep. Like I literally, man, have been at camps, even with high school kids, and like one kid held up the whole line because he just kept wanting to get back in front of the line to do the same drill over and over and over again. And he literally told everybody else, no, y'all gotta wait. Like he wanted to go against the best and compete against the best. And I also think, man, the greats, they don't duck smoke. Like, you know, they're not looking for an excuse. They want to play a team at full strength. They don't want guys to be injured. They don't want guys to get kicked out of a game. The best goes against the best. And so I think, man, just that mentality of, you know, being there when you're not told to be there, and wanting to compete at the highest levels to get better. Like that's what I've seen, man, firsthand, you know, that separates the great athletes from the good athletes for sure.
Mhm. The Bengals. What are your thoughts? I didn't really pay attention to them until I moved here, and
Yeah,
I can't help but hear about them.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Bengals?
Yeah. So first, you can see right over my head this Browns helmet. So and the Browns football next
I
to it. So
see.
let's just be clear. This is we in the AFC North, but it's all things dog pound this way. However, in saying that, man, Cincinnati, obviously incredible talent, and in the NFL, it starts at the quarterback position. You have to have that position solidified in order to be a legitimate team year in and year out that can compete consistently. And Joe Burrow, man, I remember, hearing when he left from Ohio State and went to LSU and seeing the record season he had there, with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I mean, dude is special. He's ideally what you want in a quarterback. Can make all the throws on the field, incredible arm talent. They have great weapons around him. Jamar Chase, Triple Crown winner this year, led the NFL in every receiving category there is, but for whatever reason, they just start slow every single year. They start slow. I don't know what it is, but it's like it's not until week 6 or 7 that switch flips on and they're like, oh, like we're playing football.
Do you
And
think
so,
that's you think that's a
personally,
coaching
being
thing?
being in our division, we love that they play slow. So like,
Uh-huh.
don't come into form until after you play us. But I think
Yeah.
I think all the pieces are in place for sure. They just got to figure out how to get out the gate a little bit sooner. That's all.
Mm. Do you think that's a coaching thing? The
I
fact
do.
that they start slow?
I do, 100%, man, because as the head goes, so does the body, right?
Mhm.
So if the coach is preaching from April when off-season programs are starting, all the way through. Like I use the Chiefs as an example. Like one of the things that you've been hearing consistently about the Chiefs is they're running plays in off-season program that they know they're gonna run in the Super Bowl. Right. Like so the coach is already preparing them, hey, like we're going to go play in another Super Bowl this year, and here's the situations we're gonna be in. Right. And
Mhm.
so I think, man, when you have that type of culture and that type of coach that's leading with that level of intensity and focus, how can that not permeate throughout the rest of the organization? So I definitely think it's coaching. I'm not going to bash Zach Taylor. I think he's a good coach. I just think, man, whatever the messaging has been, it's got to be tweaked in order for those guys to hit that on switch a little bit quicker. I mean, they lost the first game of the season to the Patriots. No knock to the Patriots at all, but going into that game, everybody had the Bengals picked on paper to win. And ultimately, that was one of those games that kept them, from entering the postseason, which, man, they would have been, they were the hottest team in the NFL to that point. So I'm sure a lot of teams in the AFC are glad the Bengals didn't make it, because they were peaking and clicking at the right time. But, just the messaging, from the coach has to be a little bit different, a little bit earlier. But also, coach can't be on the field in between the lines. Players got to step up and respond and play as well. So, there's responsibility to be had on both sides.
Definitely. What's your message to those players that they probably can't publicly say it,
Yeah.
but they feel defeated? They may be frustrated with the way things, specifically this last season went.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the cool things that we did this year, this past season was my first full season as the chaplain. I came in the season prior as co-chaplain and
Mhm.
learned a lot. Was able to learn the environment, learn from the previous chaplain on how to just impact the organization. So that coming into this season that just passed, I would have a good understanding of how to lead, the ministry to our organization. And one of the things we did, man, is we had a ministry thing this year. You go on my social media, you can see it, and it was winning with wisdom.
Mhm.
Because obviously there's a bigger game that we're playing than on Sundays. It's the game of life. And, we looked at Proverbs 16:9, which was our main verse for the season. It says, commit your actions to the Lord or commit your work to the Lord and your plans will succeed. And so coming off this theme, we have 5 pillars. And those 5 pillars were: one, how do we win at home? Right? We want to be amazing husbands. We want to be amazing fathers. We want to be amazing brothers and sons, so on and so forth. Secondly, how do we win in relationships with other people? The third thing we talked about is how do we win in the locker room, right? How do we live in front of non-believing teammates and coaches in a way that would, have them question what it means to be a follower of Christ. How do we win in the building, right? Those guys spent, the whole week in the practice facility, right? You've got the nutrition staff, the trainers, so on and so forth. How do we win in the building and let our light shine before everyone? And then last, number 5 is how do we win others to Christ? And so for me, especially from a ministry context, I don't need to speak to the X's and O's, right? They're getting that from our head coach, day in and day out, their position coaches. What I'm trying to help them grasp is, man, how do we just win in this thing called life? Because when we win in life, it honors the Lord, and ultimately we show others what it means to live for him. So regardless of what happens in the course of a game on a Sunday or Monday or Thursday, whenever they're playing, man, those men can still walk away and lay their head on that pillow at night knowing, man, I won where it really matters. Now, again, we certainly want to win on the field as well. I'll be the first to admit, man, I want some hardware on this hand. I want to hold the Lombardi trophy, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, when the game of life is over, that's where we want to be true winners. So that's what I share with our guys, man. And they received it very well.
Definitely. There was, and I only know this because of what I do, my day job. There was talks about potentially there's debates and stuff with the county and all of that, and talks of maybe the Bengals won't stay in Cincinnati.
Mhm.
What do you think that's realistic? And if so, where would they go?
Man, that's a good question. I didn't know the Bengals were having those conversations.
It's not. Let me clarify. It's not
Yeah,
confirmed that they're having conversations. It's
got you.
just looking at disputes over
Yeah,
contracts with the
yeah,
county and everything
sure,
that
sure.
they could. It's a potential. That's one of the options. But
Got you.
it's
Yeah,
a long shot. It's a long shot. But it's a long shot that is in the back of people's minds.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what do you
No,
think?
for sure.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're going through a similar situation in Cleveland right now, where there's talks of a new stadium being built. That's
Same
going to
in
be
here. Yeah.
outside of downtown Cleveland, and with such a passionate fan base, you have people on opposite sides. You have people that want the stadium to stay where it is because they just like being downtown on the lake, and then you have others that are more of the modern day motto, man, give us a dome. We're tired of sitting in the snow. We want to be able to attract more events and business, to Northeast Ohio. So, just thinking about the situation in Cincinnati, I think that if that does progress, you're going to have probably a lot of the same, feelings. You're going to have a
Mhm.
fan base that is, set on, man, this is how things have always been. Let's just keep them here. And then you're going to have, another side of the fan base, especially probably the younger fan base, right? Because the younger generation that's coming up, man, they like the bells and whistles, right? They love
Yeah.
the SoFi stadiums, the open air, they love the Viking Stadium, the dome that you can see through, things of that nature. So I just think, man, it depends on what side what side of the fence you sit on. But I think everyone can agree on the fact they don't care where they play so long as they win a Super Bowl. So it's like, hey,
Yeah.
you can play in a local metro park. Just make sure you're the last team standing at the end of the season. But people are that's the one thing about sports, man. You got to respect tradition. You got to respect, people having just things they're accustomed to doing, like their tailgate experience, childhood memories of going to games with their grandparents or season ticket holders as a family. So I can respect all sides of the conversation, man. At the end of the day, I think just as a pure sports fan, you just want to see your team do well, even if it's not necessarily where you've been accustomed to seeing them. So
Mhm.
long as you still can, because there's a lot of cities looking at it on the opposite. There's a lot of cities that wish they had, a pro sports franchise of any kind in their
Yeah.
city and don't have any. And so I just think, man, sometimes we just gotta be, willing to move with the times, accept change, as it comes, and ultimately just hope, like I said, your team is the last one standing at
Mhm.
the end.
Mhm. there are people out there, kind of separate from the Bengals and the Browns. There are people out there that think it's rigged for the Chiefs. It's just rigged. Um, you see it. I see it all on Twitter.
Yeah,
I may not even watch a game, but I can tell certain people are going to have their theory of why it was rigged.
yeah, yeah.
Um, what's your thoughts on that?
Hey man, listen, when you the top dog, everybody want to see you fall. Like, we saw it. So I grew up in the Brady era, and the Jordan era, right? There's gonna be there were so many athletes and so many teams that never saw a championship because they played during the Jordan era. There are so many, teams that didn't see a Super Bowl dream come true because they played during the Brady era. And now we're seeing that next iteration of that, with teams that are going to have a very hard time winning because they're playing in the Mahomes era. For me, man, like, and I'll be the first to admit, I was not a fan of the Patriots. I was not a fan of Brady. But the one
Mhm,
thing that I had to do, like, you got to respect greatness, man. You got to respect greatness. Now, unless you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, you're gonna think stuff is rigged. You're gonna think the NFL script writers, wrote this into existence. But as a pure sports fan, man, for me, I acknowledge greatness for what it is, man. I think the run, and if the Chiefs can pull this off, a week from tomorrow, they'll go down as one of the best dynasties, over the last decade, because it's so hard to get to one Super Bowl, let alone be in a position to win three straight. And
mhm.
Mahomes is only 29 years old, meaning that, he's got at least another, 5 to 10 years, to continue to compete at a high level. Because the one thing I respect about the Chiefs, man, they're just one of those teams that no matter what type of game they're playing, they're going to find a way to win, right? If it's a shootout, all right, we're going to have to score 50 points. Or if it's a defensive battle, all right, we just need to be the last. We need to be the team with the ball last, getting the field goal range. I mean, they did it last year against the 49ers. And so I think, man, I'm not going to hate on them, as a purist of the game and just as someone that loves football, I respect what they're doing. And, Kelsey is from Cleveland as well, so it would be cool to see, him make history. But yeah, man, like you got to respect it, bro. People hated the Bulls in the 90s. People couldn't stand the Patriots in the early 2000s. Like this is just history repeating itself, and
Mhm.
I just hope our team, is the one to beat them. Let me say that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I get that. So what's a day in the life of a NFL chaplain,
yeah,
or
yeah.
I
So
should say FCA?
yeah, 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 absolutely. So, my day job, so to speak, I'm what we call the Metro Cleveland Director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, a role that I'm really blessed to serve in. So I oversee all of our FCA ministry across Cuyahoga County. So that includes our huddles, which are on campus Bible studies where coaches and athletes meet weekly to be developed and strengthened in their faith in Christian community. We're blessed to be in K-8 schools, high schools, and college campuses across Cuyahoga County. We have FCA Sports Camp every summer where athletes compete in their sport, but they're also inspired to pursue relationship with Christ. I've got an amazing staff that I work with every single day, amazing group of board members, an incredible support system of donors that financially invest in the ministry. And so that's awesome, man, because I just get to connect with so many incredible people across all our different metropolitan areas outside of Cleveland. And it's just awesome, man. And what better way than to advance God's kingdom than to leverage the platform of sport as a way to share the gospel. So shout outs to FCA. And I'm really grateful to serve in that role. Chaplaincy specifically, it's different in both leagues.
Mhm,
NBA, those guys play, so many games. So my routine on the NBA side is really game day. So I'm at the arena, hour and a half before the game. I'm getting there, I'm ministering to staff throughout the building, whether it's security guards, whether it's concessions people, again, just be in the hands and feet of Christ, because I understand, yes, even though we are there to serve or do a pregame chapel for players and coaches, well, you have an opportunity to serve the entire organization. And so, getting there early just to, hear about how someone's family is doing, talk about things outside of, their 9 to 5. So that's a blessing. But, an hour before tip, both home and visiting team come into the locker room, and you're leading both teams through a pregame chapel service for 15 minutes. So they're getting in the word together to compete before to fellowship before they go out on the floor and compete. And I think that's really cool because you just get to see how widespread faith is across the NBA. On the NFL side, our guys only play once a week unless you got a Thursday night game. You're playing twice in that 1 week. But throughout the course of the week, I'm leading player Bible studies, coaches Bible studies for the staff in our building. I'm doing one-on-one discipleship both in and outside the building. And then you have pregame chapel the night before. So NFL is a lot more hands-on just by nature of, the frequency of their games and their schedule, being a lot more conducive to that type of ministry environment. But in both settings, you see the Spirit of God move. So it's a blessing. Again, just being present where my feet are and, making sure every time I show up, I'm ready to serve and, love these coaches and athletes and people throughout the organization with the love of Christ, man.
Mm-hmm. I see the shoes back there.
Yes, sir.
I'm a bit, as I've gotten older, I've become a sneakerhead, or more
Okay.
interested, I should say, in shoes.
Yeah.
What's your favorite type? I think I could guess looking, but what's your favorite? What's your favorite shoe?
Oh man, so I've been before I had a career in sports ministry, I had a career in sneakers, man. So I worked at a sneaker store, and
Mhm.
it was really a childhood dream because I always used to love going to the finish lines and Foot Lockers. I said, man, one day I want to work at a sneaker store, and it just began to feed this addiction, right? But I'm obviously a Jordan fan, growing up in the Jordan era. I mean, like I just love his shoes, man. But it's hard for me to have a favorite, but Jordan 1s, you can play those with a lot of different things. Jordan 3s, Jordan 4s, then I would say 11s, 12s, and 13s. Now, I'm not one of those guys that goes past 15, for me, that's a cutoff, man. Now I do like the 17s, the briefcase, excuse me, was dope with that. But we getting up in the 32s and 33s. Nah, y'all, them boys that hoop can have them. Like I'm just wearing mine strictly on the fashion side. But
Yeah,
yeah, Jordans, and then what you can't see, I got quite a few off whites and Travis Scott's, as well in the collection. So yeah, man, hype beast, sneakerhead, whatever you want to call me, man. Like guilty as charged.
for sure, for sure. Nike Dunks have really got a stronghold on me. I was watching because I'm a UFC fan, so I was watching Dana White,
Okay.
and he did this tour of his closet, and of course the man is loaded. He's
Yeah.
and he wears the same type of shoe. It's always a Nike Dunk. It's always gonna be a Nike Dunk.
Hmm.
Um, and his reasoning was because it's comfortable, but I never thought of Nike Dunk being comfortable. And I tried. I've only had like one pair in my entire life, so I tried it. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. And then my day job, they're easy to wear.
Okay.
I could put them on with a suit and everything. So I'm a Nike Dunk guy.
Okay.
Over Christmas, I was in the store and I saw New Balance. I didn't even know New Balance
Yeah. That's the
was
wave
making
right
a
now.
comeback. I didn't even know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in the store, I'm seeing all these New Balances. I'm like, what's going on? So I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is a different design. I think it's 9060 or something like that. New Balance
Yeah.
90.
Yep.
And so I'm like, okay, and I bought a pair, comfortable, extremely comfortable, looks fairly decent. What do you think about New Balance?
Oh man, I respect what New Balance is doing right now, man. They found a way to get tapped into the culture,
Yeah.
and for me, man, being a sneakerhead is not just uh relegated to one specific shoe. I like, if you love sneakers, in my book, you're a sneakerhead. Now, obviously I have more Jordans than I have anything else, but
Yeah.
I love and respect the way the New Balance is on, man, especially how they've been able to influence culture with the celebrities, athletes that are endorsing the brand now. And they took a new approach, man. I think the designs are extremely creative. The colorways are super dope. They're comfortable, you know, because not everything can be like Nike can't win all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Yeah.
enough room out here for everybody. So I
How do
love,
you think they did that though? Like they are fairly
yeah.
competitive to Nike at this
No,
point.
for sure, man. Honestly, man, I think it was the marketing, the messaging, the
Mhm.
branding. You know, some of the commercials I've seen with like Kawhi Leonard, you know, and some of the athletes they've been able to attract from. Like anytime, like Nike is king. Like we understand nobody will ever, you know, be Nike, but when you can begin to influence athletes to choose your brand over the brand everybody is going with, like
Mhm.
naturally that's just going to create movement in that direction. And I think because you're seeing like the Coco Golfs and the Tyrese Maxey's, like the up and coming in their the Cameron Brinks from WNBA, like when you see these athletes that have their own fan base, you know, beginning to move in that direction, well, naturally they're going to bring people with them as well. So, you know, I think New Balance just, you know, they did a good job of riding this new wave of celebrity and really just appealing to, you know, just the spirit of individuality and creativity, and you know, just giving their athletes a voice. So you know, mad respect to New Balance, and you know, Puma is having a similar effect, you know, in its own right as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, I respect what they're doing.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Were you ever a Yeezys guy?
Oh man, yeah, I got a whole bunch of Yeezys
Okay.
over
Yeah.
here, man. And honestly, man, like the Wave Runners are one of my favorite. Like the
Mhm.
Wave Runners and the Zebra 350s, like those
Yeah.
two, man. Like I remember when the Zebras came out, the internet crashed, man. Like like that's when I knew the hype was real. So yeah, I definitely, and they were super comfortable. Like I literally
Oh
like,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, like took several naps in some Yeezys because I forgot they was on my feet. So yeah,
Yeah.
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 No, I definitely had a few of those. The slides, you know, same deal, you know. So yeah, I definitely was a fan of the Yeezy Wave for sure.
What do what do I personally feel like what happened to Adidas and Kanye shouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
Um, but I kind of felt he wanted it to happen.
yeah,
Um, what do you think? Because I've seen like Kanye is so, or Ye or whatever he goes by now,
yeah, yeah,
um, is so unpredictable.
yeah,
So he posts this, and I follow him simply because I'm a huge fan. He's from Chicago.
yeah,
I've been
yeah,
a
yeah,
fan, since college dropout, all that stuff. And
yeah,
so um it appears he's making his move back into, fashion and shoes and
yeah,
merchandise
yeah,
um on his own. And some of the stuff does look okay. It looks like
yeah,
something I would wear.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Man, you know, they went on a historic run. You know,
Yeah.
like it's always cool when you, again, you know, obviously Nike is Nike, right? You know, they're always gonna have the most money to promote, advertise, so on and so forth. But to see an artist, you know, that was able to have the type of impact he had on fashion and sneaker culture, you know, it was I don't remember, you know, any musician having that type of impact, you know, to
Mhm.
where like he had his own line. Like, you know, obviously Jay-Z had his shoe and 50 Cent had theirs and things of that nature. But, you know, Ye's just always been a creative genius. So whatever he was going to do, and then you partnered with Adidas, you know, which was super creative in their own right. You know, he went on a historic run. And I don't know if it came down to a power struggle. I don't know if it came down to creative control, because it seemed like they were allowing him to have a lot of control, and depending on, you know, what side of the fence you're on, you know, you're going to be holding to that opinion. But I thought it was dope. You know, it naturally, anytime controversy happens, you know, you got to expect there's going to be some fallout. There's going to be some
Mhm.
ramifications from that. You know, I thought it played out pretty ugly, you know, to the point where you know, I think we saw Adidas drop some of his shoes and stuff like that still, but then he dropped it as well. So like it just played out very messy in the public eye, you know. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, I think what happened is that the product, right, and what they were trying to accomplish, the vision of it became collateral damage. You know, and I think that's the unfortunate part, man, because, you know, throughout the course of history, you look at very successful things, and you know, anytime they fall apart, it's like, man, like, but the vision, right? What they were trying to build, ultimately wound up being damaged in the process. So, they had a historic run. I hate that it played out so messy. But I think if anything, Kanye gave a model, to other up and coming guys that, man, if you've got something, creative outside the box, when you get partnered, with the right machine, you really put some things in motion. So even with the negativity, there's some valuable lessons that I think still came out of that whole experience for sure.
Definitely. You mentioned success. How do you define, just in general, outside of sneakers, whatever? How do you
Yeah.
define success?
Yeah, for me, man, I think, and it is actually it's funny you asked this question because one of my signature talks I go and give is called God's definition of success.
Mm,
Especially because I'm in this world of pro sports and success can be defined by so many different things. But for me, man, not to be overly deep about it. Success is, man, when I look back, over my life, did I use, was I obedient to God's word? Did I do God's will? And did I cause others to follow after him? For me, man, if those, and did I lead my family well? If those four things, I can look at and every one of those boxes are checked, then for me, I feel as though I was a success because I did things that not just impacted my life, but ultimately had an impact on others. We look at the life of Jesus, man. Anywhere throughout the Gospels, it talks about Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve, and gave his life for many. And obviously, he's the only man that will ever have died, for the salvation of humanity. But I believe, I need to, in fact, give my life and serve others because that's what I look at as success. Here's a man who literally had 3.5 years in ministry, and we're still talking about him to this day. And millions of people all over the world are disciples and followers of his. And if the foundation of his ministry was serving, and it created massive success, then that's a model that I'm following as well.
definitely. You mentioned leading your family. That's being a mark of success.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, and I think in general in society, family is becoming less and less, or it appears, I may be wrong,
Hmm.
it appears it's becoming less and less important. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think when we go back to just the beginning, God's design and his creation, a like it was something that he instituted. It was something he created. And anytime we get away from God's original design of anything, it's destined to fail, right?
Mm,
Because whatever he created, so long as he's in it and he's the foundation of it,
mhm.
even when challenges come, it's still going to thrive and it's still going to be successful. My parents, shout outs to them, man. They've been married, I think 35 years now, and those 35 years have been full of a number of different things,
Yeah.
health challenges, financial challenges, you name it. But at the end of the day, because they've always left room for the Lord to work in and through their marriage, their family, me and my sisters, were able to thrive as a result of that. And
Mhm.
so, when as we look at culture and society today, the reason we see family falling apart is because Christ is not the foundation of these families, right? It's impossible to have success in something God designed absent of God. Like that's, First Corinthians 3:11 says there's no other foundation that can be laid than that which is Jesus Christ. So, but here's the good news, right? Because I don't ever want to just focus on the negativity of it. The good news is, man, we do have people out here serving as examples of, what a wholesome family model would look like, right? And so even though we're seeing, the family suffer at different points, there are examples that we can look to and point to and even walk alongside some of these other families. That's something my wife and I do, man. We're heavy on discipleship. We invite people into our home, because we want them to see, how our family lives, in hopes that it gives them, hope and encouragement for what God can do in their family as well. Now, by no means are we perfect. By no means do we always get it right, but we at least want to lead with intentionality and show, so long as Christ is the foundation, his design for family will be successful. And so I think, man, when we just take ownership of our own homes and just see, man, how am I living, and am I living in a way that can be an example for someone else's family, and be willing to invite people into that world and into that space to see your family as well, man, I believe we can see Christ be the foundation of families once again.
Definitely. Last thing, when it comes to your entire journey, and where you are now, what do you foresee for you next? How does that look? What do you think is the next thing for you?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, man, I always thought ministry would, be ministry in churches, that I'd speak at youth conferences, youth conventions, things like that.
Yeah.
Speaking a pulpit on Sunday morning. But as the Lord continues to open up these other opportunities for ministry, I really sense that the Lord has entrusted this evangelistic ministry to me, to be able to just go out, everywhere, to all ends of the earth, and preach the gospel, and just see men and women come to salvation, not as a result of what Noble said, but as a result of the Holy Spirit moving in and through me. And so I'm in this place now, man, where I'm just asking and seeking the Lord, for just to prepare me, right? Because I know that as he continues to increase influence in the areas that he's already given, there's going to be more opportunities that present themselves to lift up the name of Jesus. I mean, especially you look at the revival we see happening in sports right now. You look at Ohio State and the
Mhm.
story book ending that they had, and the narrative that was shared all season. You look at the athletes in the Olympics. You turn on any interview, man. You turn on ESPN, it's hard to get away from a coach or athlete before they say anything acknowledging Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Christ is coming back soon. And my prayer is to bring as many people back home to meet him as possible. And so I'm just praying that the Lord continues to give me more opportunities to share the gospel. Because, man, I remember going to Billy Graham crusades as a kid. And I'm in
Yeah.
no way, shape, or form comparing myself to Billy Graham. But if there was ever a time for the gospel to be shared, if there was ever a time for the gospel to be heard, if there was ever a time for the gospel to be preached, it is now. And I'm just believing that the Lord is going to continue to open up opportunities for his people to be able to go and do that. So I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to just the different places he'll take me to. I've already been, I've done ministry out the country, and that's been incredible. Being able, one thing, I'll share this story real quick. So with FCA, we have what's called the four. And the four is literally four symbols that tell the story of salvation. It's a heart that represents God loves you. There's a division symbol that says, but sin separates us from God's love. There's a cross that says Jesus died to rescue us from sin. And then there's a question mark. And the question mark represents, will you trust Jesus? Will you follow him? And I remember being in the Dominican Republic. We were doing some basketball clinics. And man, just incredible setting. We're at this court, and it's literally in the middle of what they consider like the hood in the Dominican Republic. We were in Boca Chica, and there's violence that happens here, sex trafficking all around this basketball court, and this basketball program was for young girls, young teenage girls throughout downtown Boca Chica. And
Mhm.
literally on the back wall of their gym was these four symbols, because we had FCA leaders over there who were doing a great job. And I remember, man, being asked to lead these young women after the camp was over through the four. And so I'm sharing it in English, but there was someone next to me that was translating, and several young ladies that day made decisions to follow Christ. And so again, whether it's in a basketball court in the middle of the Dominican Republic, or whether it's in a grocery store in your local neighborhood, I'm just praying that the Lord will continue to prepare me for ample opportunities to make his name famous and share his gospel. So,
For sure. You mentioned a few times this revivals happening in sports.
Yeah.
I may be out of the loop, but for those who are out of the loop like me, explain that. What's happening? What are we seeing, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, so right now, man, you're just seeing a tremendous uprise with athletes at all levels, high school, collegiate, professionally, that anytime they're having any type of success, they're using these opportunities to just testify to the name of Jesus. You know,
Mhm.
they're acknowledging Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and that's win or lose. Obviously the college football playoff just ended, and even the team that lost, Notre Dame, their athletes went to the platform. As heartbreaking of a loss as it was, man, I just want to acknowledge Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, right? So both in victory and in defeat, athletes at all levels of sport are leveraging their platforms of influence to make Jesus famous. And so when I say revival is happening in sports, we haven't seen it to this level, man, at least for as long as I've been alive. Right. I'm 38 now, and I remember hearing and seeing athletes that were believers talking about God, but the frequency that we're hearing it and the volume of athletes, especially those that have significant influence that are doing it, is causing revival, to happen across the world. And people are taking notice. Like Ohio State players literally were baptizing student athletes, or not just student athletes, just students on campus over the summer. Like, that's revival happening through sports. That's revival happening across our world. And so it's not going to slow down. Of course, the enemy is going to try to, oppress it and oppose it and things of that nature. But, and ain't no stopping what the Lord is doing. That's for sure.
Definitely. I totally agree. I appreciate your time. I think this was a very insightful conversation.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
I think, given where we are as a country, as a world, it's important for people to take a step back and, even in the normal everyday things or the things that you like, i.e. sports, to see that and to use that for God's glory and purpose. So I love watching what you're doing via social media and everything.
Yes, sir.
Keep doing it. It's inspiring to me for sure. Um,
Appreciate it, man.
and hopefully we're in the same state. So hopefully one day,
Yeah,
we'll get
yeah.
to meet, man.
Absolutely. No, I look forward to it, man. Thank you for the opportunity to have the conversation, which it was. It was just a genuine, authentic conversation. And I'm praying the Lord uses this to impact, whomever it's meant to reach, and continue to do what you're doing as well, man. Continue to use the platform influence God has given you, to let his light shine through you, man. And I look forward to us connecting again, or connecting at some point as well.
Definitely. I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, brother. Thank you, man.